Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something really interesting you sent us. Excerpts from the book Thinking Strategically.
That's right, by Avinash Dixit and Barry Nailbuff. And they kick things off with a pretty bold idea
Which is,
that strategic thinking, figuring out what to do when your results depend on what other people do, isn't just some vague art form.
okay,
They argue there's actually a science to it. Game theory, basically.
right, game theory. But they promise it's not going to be all heavy math and jargon, right?
Exactly. They really aim to make it accessible. Lots of examples from business, politics, even just everyday life, plain English.
Good. So our goal here is to kind of walk through these ideas, pull out the key stuff, and maybe give you some tools to think more strategically yourself.
That's the plan, helping you become, as they say, a better strategist.
Okay, so let's unpack the core concept. What is strategic thinking, according to them?
At its heart, it's all about interdependence. It's not just deciding what you want to do in isolation. It's realizing that what you get depends on what others choose. And crucially, what they choose depends on what they think you'll choose.
Ah, okay, so it's this constant loop of anticipating and reacting.
Exactly. What should I do, knowing they're trying to figure out what I'll do and I'm trying to figure out what they'll do? That whole dynamic.
And that's where game theory comes in as the sort of formal way to study this.
Precisely. It's a relatively young field, actually, but it's packed with these practical insights they want to share.
Got it. So if it's about these interdependent decisions,
Mm-hmm.
what kinds of situations are we talking about? The book mentions two main types.
Right. Two main flavors of strategic interaction. First up are sequential games.
Sequential, like one after the other.
Yep. Players take turns. I make a move, you see it, then you make your move, I see that, and so on.
Like chess, obviously.
Chess is the classic example. And the key thing here is looking ahead. You have to anticipate future moves.
So when it's my turn, I'm thinking about how my move now will affect your options later.
And how your response then will affect my next move. It's about seeing the chain reaction.
They use that Peanuts cartoon, right? Lucy and the football.
Ha, yes. That's a perfect, if painful, example. Lucy holds the ball, move 1. Charlie Brown runs up, move 2. Lucy pulls it away, move 3.
And poor Charlie Brown never learns.
He should be looking ahead. He knows her track record. He should anticipate her final move based on all the previous times, but he just doesn't.
So thinking ahead is key. What other examples did they give? Business rivals, maybe?
Yeah, reacting to price cuts or moves in an arms race, even runners in a marathon jockeying for position based on where others are.
Okay, and you mentioned reasoning backward.
Right. For these sequential games, at least in theory, if there's a definite end, you can solve it. You start at the very last possible move, figure out the best choice there, then knowing that, figure out the best choice for the second to last move, and work your way back to the very beginning.
Sounds simple, but I imagine with something like chess, the number of possibilities just explodes.
Oh, absolutely. Theoretically possible. Practically impossible for complex games like chess. But the principle holds. Look ahead. Reason back.
Okay, that's sequential games. What was the second type?
Simultaneous games. This is where players act at the same time, or at least without knowing what the other player is doing right now.
Ah, okay, so you can't see their move before you make yours.
Yeah.
Like sealed bids in an auction.
Exactly. Or they mention sprint races, where you're focused on your own lane. Or maybe butterfly swimming, where it's hard to see competitors.
Or the example of Time and Newsweek choosing their cover stories for the week.
Yeah, that's a good one. They have to commit to a cover without knowing for sure what the rival magazine will feature.
So you can't react, you have to predict. You're trying to guess what they'll do now.
You got it. You have to put yourself in their shoes, think about their incentives, and try to figure out the most likely play. The famous prisoner's dilemma falls into this category.
Okay, so sequential is turns and looking ahead. Simultaneous is acting at the same time and predicting. Now, the book gives some rules for actually playing these games, right?
Yes, some basic principles for strategic play. Rule 2 is pretty clear. If you have a dominant strategy, use it.
Dominant strategy.
Use it.
That sounds powerful. What does that mean exactly?
It means you have one option that's better for you than any of your other options, no matter what the other player does.
Ah, so it doesn't matter what they choose, this move is always your best bet.
Correct. If you find one, it makes your decision much simpler. You just play it.
Like in that magazine example. If, say, the AIDS story was just always the best choice for Time, regardless of Newsweek's cover.
Then Time has a dominant strategy. And Newsweek, knowing that, should just focus on their best response, assuming Time picks AIDS. which in the book's example was the budget story.
Got it. Simplifies things. What's the next rule? Rule 3.
Rule 3 is kind of the inverse, eliminate dominated strategies.
Okay, so these are the bad ones, the ones you definitely shouldn't play.
Exactly. If one of your strategies is just consistently worse than another one of your strategies for every possible move your opponent might make.
Then just get rid of it. Don't even consider it.
Right. Cross it off your list. And importantly, your opponent can likely figure this out too, so they know you won't play that clearly inferior strategy. It simplifies the game for everyone.
They had those tables, I remember, with U.S. and Iraqi strategies where you could just cross out certain options because they were clearly losers.
Yes, that's a direct application. And the tender offer example they use is really, really insightful here.
The two-tiered one, where a company offers a high price for some shares, but a lower price for the rest.
Right. For an individual shareholder, tendering early at the higher price might look like a dominant strategy. You think, well, if the bid succeeds, I get $105. If it fails or I wait, I might get less. So tendering seems best regardless.
Makes sense for one person.
But here's the twist. If everyone follows that logic, everyone tenders early. The result can be that the average price everyone gets is actually lower than the stock price before the offer even started.
Wow. So the individually rational move leads to a collectively bad outcome.
Precisely. The rater is using the structure, that low second-tier price, to basically force shareholders' hands. It shows how individual incentives can be manipulated and don't always add up to the best group result. A really powerful point.
Definitely. So dominant strategies are good, dominated are bad. What's rule 4?
Rule 4 gets to the core idea of game theory. Look for an equilibrium.
An equilibrium.
Yeah.
Like a stable point. A balance.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. It's a pair of strategies, one for each player, where neither player has an incentive to change their strategy given what the other player's doing.
Okay, so my choice is the best response to your choice, and your choice is the best response to mine. We're kind of locked in.
That's it. If I believe you're going to stick with your strategy, my best bet is to stick with mine, and vice versa.
And if there's only one such equilibrium point,
Then, the authors argue, that's likely where rational players will end up. It's the logical outcome.
but if there's more than one?
Then it gets trickier. You might need some kind of convention, or maybe history dictates which one you settle on, or maybe you don't settle on one single strategy at all.
Interesting. Okay, going back to the sequential games for a second, that idea of looking ahead and reasoning backward seems really central.
Absolutely fundamental. You map out all the possible moves, go to the very end, figure out the best choice there, then step back, figure out the best choice knowing what happens at the end, and keep stepping back to the start.
Simple idea, complex execution, especially in real life.
Very. Now, building on influencing others in these sequential games, the book talks about making strategic moves, and they draw a really useful distinction.
Between warnings and assurances versus threats and promises.
Exactly. Warnings and assurances are mostly just conveying information about your intentions or the state of the world. If it rains, the picnic is canceled. That's just information. But threats and promises are truly strategic. You're actively trying to change the other player's behavior by committing to act in a certain way later, even if acting that way might not be in your best interest when the time comes.
Okay. Like threatening a punishment you might not actually want to carry out later.
Precisely. And that immediately raises the massive issue of credibility.
Right. Will they actually believe you? Will you follow through?
Especially if following through hurts you too. You need some way to make your commitment believable, to essentially tie your own hands or burn your bridges so you can't back down later.
The classic example they discuss is nuclear deterrence, right?
Yeah.
NATO threatening nuclear war if the Soviets launched a conventional attack.
Yes. That threat is only credible if the Soviets truly believed the U.S. would launch, even knowing the catastrophic consequences for everyone. It requires an almost irrational level of pre-commitment to be believable.
And that's where things like salami tactics come in. Small aggressions designed to test that commitment.
Exactly. Little steps that aren't quite big enough to trigger the massive retaliation, potentially exploiting any perceived lack of resolve.
We see this credibility problem elsewhere, too, like governments saying they won't negotiate with hijackers.
Right. Before a hijacking, it sounds tough, but once lives are on the line, the pressure to negotiate becomes immense, potentially undermining the credibility of the threat for future incidents.
How do you build credibility then? The book had some interesting examples.
Yeah, like Henry V ordering the ships burned before the battle. Psychologically, it removes the option of retreat, forcing commitment from his soldiers and making their stance credible to the enemy.
Or even something like a company only interviewing candidates who rank them #1.
That's a strategic move. It forces the applicant to commit to a preference, maybe even one that isn't their true first choice, just to stay in the running. It compels a credible signal.
So making threats or promises stick often involves making it costly or impossible to change your mind later.
That's the core idea. Commitment requires constraints.
Okay, that makes sense for those kinds of strategic moves. But then the authors switch gears and talk about situations where being predictable is actually bad, where you need unpredictability.
Yes. Sometimes being predictable makes you exploitable. The baseball example was perfect.
The pitcher, Dave Smith, and the batter, Len Dykstra.
Right. Smith got Dykstra out with a fastball. Dykstra then reasoned Smith wouldn't throw another fastball right away. Smith stuck to that predictable pattern and later regretted not mixing it up, not being unpredictable.
Because Dykstra could anticipate and adjust.
Exactly. Predictability gave Dykstra an edge.
Or the WWII double agents example.
Yeah, the Germans should have realized that for the double agents to be useful to the British at all, they'd have to pass along some true information sometimes, just to maintain credibility.
So you couldn't just assume everything was false or everything was true.
No. A smart German strategy would have involved randomization, assuming the information might be true, might be false, with certain probabilities, and acting accordingly, not being predictable in how they interpreted the intel.
So randomization can be a powerful strategy. But the type of randomization matters. They contrasted tennis with the gift of the Magi.
Ah, yes. That's a beautiful contrast. In tennis, it's zero-sum. My win is your loss. Your interests are directly opposed.
So you mix up your serves randomly to keep the opponent guessing. Independent randomization.
Right. But Della and Jim, in O. Henry's story, they had aligned interests. They both wanted the gift exchange to work out well.
But they acted simultaneously, selling the watch to buy combs, selling the hair to buy a watch chain.
And ended up with useless gifts because their simultaneous, uncoordinated choices clashed. What they needed wasn't independent randomness, but coordinated randomness.
Like flipping a coin together beforehand to decide who prioritizes what.
Something like that. A shared mechanism to align their unpredictable choices because their underlying goal was cooperative, not competitive like tennis.
That's a subtle but really important distinction.
Right.
And the Coke-Pepsi coupon wars, that sounds more competitive.
It is, but there's still an element of coordination, or rather, anti-coordination needed. Both want to offer coupons, but ideally not at the exact same time because that just cancels out the advantage.
So they need surprise, which suggests randomizing the timing of their coupon drops.
Exactly. Some element of unpredictability is key to gaining that temporary edge.
Okay, so strategy involves knowing when to be predictable, when to commit credibly, and when to be unpredictable. The book also talks about getting stuck, right? Well, like in bad situations or equilibria.
Yes, this connects back to that idea of multiple equilibria. Sometimes society or a group gets locked into a stable pattern of behavior that isn't actually the best possible one.
And it's hard to change because, well, everyone else is doing it.
Precisely. Inertia is powerful. The classic example is driving on the left versus the right. Once a standard is set, it's incredibly difficult and costly to switch, even if the other standard might be just as good or theoretically better.
And this isn't just about rules like that. It happens with technology.
Oh, definitely. Path dependence. The QWERTY keyboard is the famous one, designed to slow down typing on old mechanical typewriters.
To stop the keys from jamming.
Right. And even though layouts like DSK are proven faster for modern typing, we're stuck with QWERTY because it got established first. It's the equilibrium we're locked into.
Or gasoline engines beating steam or electric cars early on.
Yeah, historical accidents, a specific race outcome, even a disease outbreak affecting horses helped gasoline gain an early lead, creating infrastructure and familiarity that made it hard for alternatives to catch up.
And this applies to social behaviors too, like everyone speeding a little, or maybe everyone showing up fashionably late to parties.
Absolutely. If everyone expects everyone else to be 15 minutes late, arriving on time puts you out of sync. So lateness becomes the stable, if inefficient, equilibrium. Cheating slightly on taxes could be another example if enforcement is weak.
So how do you break out of a bad equilibrium?
It usually requires getting a critical mass of people to switch to the better behavior all at once, overcoming that inertia. The author suggests a short, sharp campaign is often more effective than gradual pressure.
Like a big push to create a dipping point, a bandwagon effect.
Exactly.
Interesting. Now, the book also applies strategic thinking to group decisions, like voting. That seems like a minefield.
It really is. Voting isn't just about expressing your true preference. It's often highly strategic.
How so?
Well, think about primaries. If your favorite candidate seems like a long shot, you might vote for your second choice, who has a better chance of winning, just to stop someone you really dislike.
The wasted vote problem.
Right. And polling can become self-fulfilling. If polls show someone is unlikely to win, people might not vote for them, ensuring they don't win.
And voters might exaggerate their positions.
Yeah, trying to pull a candidate closer to their view. Though the book notes in simple single-issue elections, voting honestly for the candidate closest to the middle ground, the median voter, is often optimal. But add more issues, and it gets complicated fast.
The Hall of Fame voting examples were wild. People voting for someone they don't really want, just to block someone else.
Or voting against someone good to ensure their absolute favorite has a better shot under some quota system. It becomes less about merit and more about complex strategic maneuvering.
Even charities do this.
Apparently so. One foundation giving a big grant to a lesser priority project first, just to influence how another foundation allocates its money between their shared top priority and its own second choice. It's all strategic positioning.
Wow. And the rules themselves, the institutional design, changed the game entirely. The line item veto example was fascinating.
Totally counterintuitive. You'd think giving the president line item veto power just helps cut wasteful spending. More power, right?
Yeah, seems obvious.
But strategically, it might actually weaken the president's overall bargaining power, because Congress might become less willing to create those package deals. You know, bundling something the president wants, like defense spending, with something else they want, like social programs.
Because they know the president can just take the part they like and veto the rest.
Exactly. It potentially makes log rolling and compromise harder because Congress loses that tool for linking issues together. And state-level experience apparently backs this up.
So changing the rules can have unforeseen strategic consequences.
Absolutely. The book also touches briefly on negotiation.
Right, things like how having good outside options, like union members having other job prospects, strengthens your bargaining position because the cost of waiting is lower for you.
And also on designing systems like auctions. How you set the rules, like making the winner pay the second highest bid, can actually encourage bidders to bid their true value, leading to more efficient outcomes.
It's amazing how these core ideas just keep popping up everywhere.
It really is. Interdependence, thinking ahead, watching for dominant strategies, finding equilibria, the importance of credibility, when to be unpredictable, coordination problems, how rules shape behavior.
You see it in business, politics, international relations.
But also negotiating with a taxi driver, figuring out how to discipline kids effectively, even, as you mentioned, structuring a fundraising campaign.
Yeah, that fundraising point about potentially getting contributions equal to the total value if you structure the bargaining right.
Yeah.
That's pretty mind-bending.
It just shows how pervasive strategic interaction is. It's not just for high-level stuff. It's woven into the fabric of everyday life.
Wow, okay, that was a seriously packed deep dive. Looking at the world through this game theory lens really does illuminate a lot.
Yeah, from Charlie Brown and the football to nuclear deterrence, from keyboard layouts to voting booths. Understanding these dynamics is powerful.
Commitment, credibility, predictability, equilibrium. These concepts give you a framework, a toolkit, for analyzing situations.
And hopefully, as the authors intended, for acting more effectively within them. Whether you're a manager, a negotiator, an athlete, a politician, even a parent.
It makes you realize you're almost always in some kind of game, interacting with others who also have goals and strategies.
Which leads to a final thought to maybe leave with you, the listener. Knowing that others are likely thinking strategically too, anticipating your moves, trying to make their threats credible, maybe even bluffing or misrepresenting their own preferences.
How does that change the way you should approach your next important interaction or decision? Something to chew on.